Everybody loves Steve. Steve Harper is a sought-after speaker, entrepreneur, and business strategist devoted to deepening and strengthening relationships through a powerful practice called rippling. In his popular book, The Ripple Effect, Maximizing the Power of Relationships for Your Life and Business, Steve uncovers the secret to creating memorable, long-lasting connections and the important impact they make in one's personal and professional life. As an expert trainer and coach, Steve's unique and refreshing view of how individuals, organizations, and even our society must reach outside the box to connect, and it's changing lives and impacting corporate bottom line dollars. Reaching beyond the corporate donors, Steve is leading a movement of connection, it's in all capitals, connection, through podcasts, Ripple events, and online communities for Ripplers worldwide. I would like to introduce Courtney Warensman and Steve Harper for his presentation, or their interview, Ripple Your Way to Your Next Role. All right, guys.
So, you heard Shannon mention rippling, rippler, all these words. So, Mr. Harper, what is this rippling thing of which you speak?
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank Shannon for inviting me and for dumping me for Courtney, which is fantastic. Courtney and I have really good rapport, so you're going to figure that out pretty quickly. So I wrote a book called The Ripple Effect, Maximizing the Power of Relationships for Your Life and Business. And it comes from my experience as being an entrepreneur for 22 years. First and foremost, I have to share, I'm introverted and shy. So this comes from a place that was really out of necessity for my survival. As an entrepreneur, not talking to people is pretty detrimental to your career, right? So I had to figure out ways to actually engage and connect with people. And so part of the process in rippling is really, my definition is any action, big or small, that makes an impact on another person, right? So the focus is, how can I create and bring value to the people that I'm engaging with and connecting with? And honestly, when I first wrote the book, I had sold a company in 2004, and somebody said, hey, you should write a sales book because you're really good at it. I wasn't really good at sales, honestly. Growing a company and doing what I was doing, I didn't feel like I was particularly skilled necessarily in that capability, but what I was really good at was engaging people in conversation, figuring out what their problems were, and then because I had grown such a network, I generally, if I couldn't solve their problem, I generally knew somebody who could, right? So creating that positive action to help people is one of the critical elements. So much in networking, I sense people it gets a bad reputation for a good reason, right? There are a lot of bad networkers out there. There's a lot of people that give you that elevator pitch and they're hitting you right between the eyes with their business cards and trying to create, the pitch and promotion for what they do. And that isn't conducive to real engagement. It's not true, it's not a good way to start a true conversation and have authenticity. So for me, rippling is about doing it different. It's about connecting different, creating opportunities to have conversation, but more importantly, creating those opportunities to have future conversations, which is kind of critical, especially for people that are in a job-seeking role.
Yeah. And you brought up the word authenticity, which is one of the things, if you ever send Steve an email, the email that comes back at the end, it always says, how can I help you, my friend? And that's a genuine ask. That is not just a generic, hey, how are you, how can I help you? And so how did you're an introvert. He's an introvert, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And so what, put you over the hump, but then allowed you to remain authentic in these relationships and growing that both from the business and the personal side?
That's a great question. Well, first and foremost, who considers themselves more introverted than extroverted? All right. Those of you that are extroverted, congratulations. That's fantastic. You were so damn lucky. But honestly, I think what I do and the work that I focus on actually helps both. Introverts, you are actually the best connectors on the planet. Why? Because you're really good at putting the attention and the focus on other people through good questions. And you become some of the most beneficial people when it comes to networking. Extroverts, you can always be better. And one of the things that I always like to tell extroverts is you always need to check yourself to make sure you're not consuming all of the oxygen in the room. Because a lot of extroverts think they're way better than they are at connecting with people, and they're generally not. In fact, they're the ones that usually need the most help because they don't recognize what kind of wake they create just in their presence. So part of where my motivation was in creating this and why that question is essentially important to me is the only way you know if you can add value to somebody is if you get to know them and you get to figure out what's important to them. I probably know what's important in the minds of everybody that's in this room today, right? It's like, oh, this is great, but I need a job. And I know that that is important and critical, but there are other elements that would help lead you to that next job that if we spend some time together, I probably wouldn't ask you like, what exact role are you looking for and how can I make that connection? It's more generic in that I'm trying to understand a little bit about what motivates and inspires you. We had this conversation earlier. What work would really light you up? Because if I can cast a wider net rather than, hey, I'm just looking for, say, a CFO role, or I'm looking to be a technical sales specialist, if I can expand that horizon to get a little more sense of who that person is, you have a lot more to build off of, right? And so part of what I like to do with that question is I like to get inside of what's going on in people's world. And here's the thing, I always get pushback in this when I speak to an audience, like, well, if I ask that question to everybody I talk to, I'm going to be overwhelmed by all of their requests and I'm trying to fulfill my own. Believe it or not, nobody ever takes you up on it. And if they do, when you have established and grown a good network of people, even if you can't solve their problem, you probably have someone in your network who can. And that's where the value of what that question comes into play. And it also makes you the person that everybody wants to talk to. And the nice thing for us introverted people is when you ask that question, you're putting the attention where? On yourself or the other person? On the other person. And that makes it so much more comfortable for us introverted people to engage in conversation, because when you shine a light on somebody else, when you put the attention on the other person, not only are you seeing and hearing the things that are important to them, but you're also figuring out inroads to continue that conversation with just a few select questions.
Well, and that was where I was going to go with my next question for you, which was, how do you then take it from learning about them and asking those questions and then eventually being able to give kind of the ask of what you need from them? Because I know I've been in front of Launchpad enough times, and I know you have as well, that one of the biggest fears here is, I don't want to ask people. It feels icky and all that. So how do you go from authentic through the ick to being able to ask what you need?
So you need to establish enough rapport before you make the ask. Do you want to know, this is a very unscientific study, but I did for my community, for people that were out of work, how quick they actually put on the table that they were looking for their job. Anyone want to guess how quickly into a new conversation somebody brings that up?
Oh, first minute.
You're close. Anybody else?
10 seconds.
45 seconds. In most cases, people will be like, hey, thanks for coming to the event. It's great to be here. I'm looking for a job. And that just is a deal killer for almost everybody, right? Not because they don't want to help you, not because people aren't genuinely good and really want to try and contribute or add value when and where they can, but it's because you're putting somebody in an uncomfortable position. I don't know you. I don't know how I could help you. I don't have anything established in terms of rapport, so we don't have any trust. There's no value built. But now you're hitting me with this thing right between my eyes, which is almost as bad as listening to your 30-second elevator pitch on a networking situation. Nobody closes on an elevator pitch. Let's just put it that way, right? And you'll have other networking experts that'll come in and go, you got to get it down and you got to make it work. Feel free to listen to their advice. It does not work for me, and I haven't seen it work for a lot of people. The reality is, the best way to connect is heart to heart, belly to belly. Have conversations, engage people, be curious, and don't put your needs before their needs. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be, sort of the savior for everybody, but at the end of the day, if you say, hey, I really, before we ever even establish any further conversation, I'm not really interested necessarily in trying to pitch you or promote anything or do anything. You are there, your whole premise is to build trust and try to create some value in that conversation any way you can. So if you walk into a group like this, the first question that you should maybe ask somebody who's new is, what brought you here? We all know why you're here, right? But what motivated you to come to this event versus any of the other events you could go to? I mean, this is Austin, Texas. It's a Friday. There's probably 12 networking events going on right now. You can pretty much eat your weight through lunches and breakfasts and bar tabs and whatnot, right? And the reality is, how many of those events just plain suck, right? At the end of the day, they're emotionally draining. They're physically difficult to be up for and go to. It's because we have the same old tried old conversations over and over again. So you got to do it different.
Well, and it sounds like part of what you're saying also is it has to do with intentionality.
Yes.
And so you can't just walk into a room and expect people to flock to you. So how, if you were going into a new session as a new Rippler, this is your first idea of rippling, what would you want to do beforehand, the night before or the hour before, to help get you in the right mindset to do this?
It's great. I was talking to somebody just last week actually about, boxing and MMA fighting. And do you think those fighters, before they walk into the ring, are focused on anything but not getting killed, right? To not take the punch, not lose the fight. They're focused on the task at hand. What I see that people make the biggest mistake is they'll go from event to event to event and they don't put any thought into, hey, what worked at the last event? What felt more comfortable? What do I like? What did I not like? And then preparing for the one that's in front of you, right? Coming in with the right mindset. What am I looking to accomplish? What am I looking to do, right? And I think one of the biggest challenges that people face, especially coming into a new event, is they're doing so much to be accepted, and they feel like they have to have that best elevator pitch, or they have to have that very trendy hook in order to feel acceptance. And it comes from a logical place. As human beings, there are two things that, without question, all of us have in common. Number one, we don't ever want to be embarrassed or feel uncomfortable. So we'll talk out our ass just to not feel uncomfortable, right? We'll say things that we're like, how did that come out of my mouth? Why did I say what I just said? Oh my God. The reality is people do that because they didn't have a game plan. They weren't thinking about, how am I going to be intentional and engage? How am I going to have this conversation with this larger than life personality, Shannon, because I want to make an impression, I want to have a good conversation, but I also want to feel good about it. And the other thing is that the second thing that most people aren't really aware of, but it's really true, is the less you talk, the more rapport you build with the other person. And this is really hard for extrovert people, right? Because they're like on their hands, they're so desperate to say the next thing. The biggest problem is you're thinking about the next thing to say, and you're not thinking about what they're saying. You actually have to listen and you have to hear. You have to really be intentional about that. So walking into your ring, your proverbial networking ring, is you have to be, what's my goal here? Can I have one or two solid conversations? Can I find a way to really engage people at a little bit different level? And here's what happens when you do it. You are the exception to the entire event, because the vast majority of us are trying to put our things in front of everybody or pitch or promote or whatever. That doesn't actually help people align, right? But that unusual conversation, that very unique direction that conversation led, that's what keeps you top of mind. And that's also what people are really interested in doing, which is being curious about you. So your job and your goal in any networking situation is to say just enough to make them curious, but the way you make them curious is by being curious and intentional in how you talk to them. So having good questions, engaging at that level. Believe it or not, you may not even say 5 words and they'll come back and be like, man, that was the best conversation I had all night. And it's because you put the attention on them and you did it differently than anybody else does.
One of the things that I always tell my clients is networking is not an event, it's a way of life. And I think so many people go into these networking events wanting to work the room and, like you said, get your card in everybody's hands. I need a job, hey, can anybody hire me? But then it's just an event. And then you go home and you go, well, I didn't get anything out of that. Well, it's because it's not about an event. So how do you then take this event and have it carry forward when the event's over?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. First of all, I dislike the word networking immensely, right? For me, it conjures up that really, I don't know, it's acid reflux or whatever. I just got to crap myself. I don't like the word, right? At the end of the day, it is, the whole concept of it is just broken, right? Throwing strangers in the same room, hoping we all get along, and then somebody sells or buys or, lands their job, right? It doesn't work that way. I would replace networking with connecting. My job is to connect in an authentic way with at least one human being at this event. If I can do that, if I can get them to have more than that 30-second, 60-second conversation, for them to actually ask me a question or to want to get to know me, to spark that curiosity, then I've done something significant. But the problem I think that a lot of people run into is that they don't have a game plan walking in, and they also think that they have to do it like everybody else. Go to any networking event and just watch how bad people are. And we just generation after generation of really bad networkers, right? If you're introverted like me, here's a tip. There will be generally 4 corners to every room, all right? And if you don't know where to go start, the cool kids are off talking, doing their thing, it's fine. There will be one person in a corner somewhere holding onto that plate for dear life because it's like their security blanket, or that drink or whatever. Walk over to them and ask them this question. I have a running bet. Which of us is having a worse time at this event, you or me? That will kick off a conversation that I promise you will be memorable. And then after you've built some rapport with that person, go find your other 3 people, because there's 3 other corners, and guaranteed now you have a tribe. And now you have friends that you can actually network, and you can do it in a fun, more meaningful way. And it allows you, there's strength in numbers, there's confidence that gets built when you do that. But part of this is also, but even before you go to events or before you go to any kind of networking function, every single day, life, God, the universe, whatever, puts people in your path at exactly the time they're supposed to be there. Problem is, most of us are attached to our phones, or we're looking at the board to order our Starbucks or whatever. We're not actually focused on the present here and now. And the reality is, if you don't look up and look out, you will miss the people that should be in your path every single day. And I guarantee it doesn't even matter if you're walking into ACC, you're going to lunch afterwards, you're participating in some event tonight. There are people that you are destined to meet, but if you're not committed to meeting them, then you will have missed that opportunity. As an introverted, shy individual, I can't tell you how many times I missed those opportunities. But once I figured out that I'm gonna walk into every single day and I'm look at it as an opportunity to connect with at least one human being, I don't need an event to actually connect. Some of my greatest money that I've earned as an entrepreneur had nothing to do with a cold call, had nothing to do with reaching out to an organization, trying to connect via LinkedIn. It came from conversations with people I had at Starbucks. I actually sold a company in 2004 that actually, in part, came from a conversation that got started just talking to another patron at the coffee shop. And that led to an introduction to somebody who was interested in business, and next thing you know, ripples happen, right? So a ripple, casting that stone into that crystal clear pond, that is your action. When you cast it, you have no idea how big a splash you make, how deep that water is, how far that ripple goes, that action. And the ripple, here's the unusual thing, it ripples out, but always ripples back to you in unexpected ways. So meeting people, connecting with them, even in very inconsequential environments or in situations that you never would have expected, that can open doors to opportunity and lead to your next job.
Was it you who told me the popcorn cart story at Costco? Or did that come from someplace else?
That wasn't me. I can make up one.
Well, do you mind if I share this from
feel
home?
free.
And I don't remember
Yeah.
who told me this, and I figured it was you, but it's not. So maybe it was a former client. Anyway, in Costco on a Saturday, you're in there in your shorts and your sandals in the middle of the summer, you're sweating, waiting in line with all the people who are getting the pizza and the Slurpees. And in front of this person in line, the person in front of him or her had an entire Costco cart full of popcorn. Now, I don't know anybody on the planet who needs an entire cart of popcorn. So the person who I was talking to, that I cannot remember, said to this person, "What's up with the popcorn?" And it turns out that this person was the CEO of a startup who they have a popcorn cart in their office. And once a month, he would go to Costco, or once every 6 months, and go buy popcorn for the popcorn cart. Y'all, CEO of a startup who then wound up hiring this person, so it must have been a client. If you're sitting there just looking on your phone going, "Oh my gosh, y'all, check out this guy with all the popcorn," as opposed to saying to the popcorn guy, "What's up with the popcorn?" It's a missed opportunity.
Absolutely.
And so just showing interest in what people are doing. Now, you mentioned whether it's an event. When we think about here, we're coming here to talk about job search, and we're coming here to purposely talk about networking and how do we connect. What are some of those situations that maybe you can find yourself in? You know, one that hits me is Cotton Bowl, Hook 'em Horns, next Friday, you know, in the parking lot. But what are some of those places that maybe you unexpectedly ought to intentionally place yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of environments. Obviously, the networking environments are what they are, right? But I think that you find commonality with anybody that you're really intentional with. So you don't actually have to have an event. I can have a conversation. I've heard this before. It takes years to build rapport and have a real, genuine connection to another human being. I say BS to that. I've had genuine connections with people that took 30-second elevator rides with me, and we just had that chemistry and that engagement, and you never know where that might go. You have other situations where you're at the neighborhood barbecue and you don't know your neighbors all that well, or you're at a community event, or you come to a social like the Christmas party, which I was really sad to miss last month. But those are opportunities to practice your connecting skills. I'll tell you one way that if you really want to be ballsy and test it out, make a sign on a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, put open for conversation, put it as a tent, and then go sit at Starbucks. I've been thrown out of Starbucks for doing this, so if you get arrested, don't call me. It's true, but we dispatched all of our Ripplers to every Starbucks back in the day. There was like 15 of them. Right now there's like 15 in a block. But you know, we sent it out just to see and test this theory that most of us, the reality is most of us are actually lonely. We're in an environment where we're more connected than we ever have been. We're in a situation where we can pretty much find anybody or find out anything about anybody just by using different social avenues. Turns out we're not any better at connecting face to face, having a conversation. And you really want to test your skill sets. Do it when you actually have to have a conversation with a complete stranger that isn't geared around you selling or pitching something. It isn't around you trying to land the next job, and it isn't about trying to figure out what they want to sell or pitch you either. It's about who is this person on the other side of the table with me? Who's the person having coffee? How do you have that conversation? What do you start? Well, what'd you order for a drink? What's the best muffin? You know, when you don't go to Starbucks, what's the place that you would go to? These are all what I call ripple connection questions. They're invitations to a deeper, more meaningful conversation if the other person is A, receptive and doesn't think you're up to something creepy, and they are open to having that conversation with someone who's obviously asking it without any motivation whatsoever other than they're curious. Curiosity opens up more doors than you can possibly imagine. So I would say looking for anything that there is a gathering of people, but not too big, right? But you can also go to, let's say you go to a conference. It's amazing how small we make the world when we really think about it, right? Texas, huge, right? It takes me forever to get out of here to go to New Mexico, where I'm from. Which, by the way, yes, I do speak English. It's great. Yes, Breaking Bad was filmed in my neighborhood. And I literally walk by Walter White's house every day on the way to middle school. So, and it is true, in order to get out of New Mexico, we had to sell meth. We had a quota. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Totally kidding. Or am I? I'm just saying. No. But the reality is that Texas seems like it's enormous. You can never meet everybody there is. But you go to an event in California and you hear somebody that has sort of a Texas slang, and you're like, hey, where are you from? And they're, oh, I'm from, Dallas. I live in Austin. All of a sudden, what was big is now small. Now we've just we now have this, what I call a connection point. Connection point is any bite-sized morsel of information that you can learn about somebody that you file away, right? If you follow me, you would know I'm an avid Longhorn, hook 'em. I am also believe that Dak Prescott will win us the next 5 Super Bowls. All my credibility goes out the window when I say pretty much. Yeah, gosh. I don't want to wish for Jerry Jones's demise, but boy, it would help. Anyway, just saying. The reality is that you figure out how to create rapport with people based on circumstances. And so we often find that, I don't know a complete stranger, but just with a little bit of well-placed questions, what brought you to this event? Who are you excited to see? What have you learned coming to these events? Those are 3 questions that open up a conversation, and you're not even having to talk. But you're learning these things, and there'll be things that really get your antenna fired up, and those are the things you want to write down that are connection points. 9 times out of 10, when I'm networking, it's nothing to do with business, and it's nothing to do about growing my company or even trying to promote anything I'm doing. But I'm actively looking for ways to use that question. What can I do to be helping you? How can I help you? Like Eric, right? I have a connection for Eric just because of what Eric shared. I know an organization that does nothing but focus on Salesforce trainers. So we'll definitely connect. But when you get that connection point, the power in the connection point is how you apply it, how you use it. And it can be something as mundane as your favorite sports team, or the fact that they're really into fashion, or whatever the case might be. I'll tell you, the most memorable experience I ever had with somebody connecting with me was waiting outside of this lady my wife used to make me go get my hair cut from. I don't know why, I didn't like her, but she's not a Rippler. I'm sitting there, and this lady that I've seen several times, you know, obviously getting her hair done somewhere else, is like in one of these cooperative, I don't know, could have been a cult, I have no idea. But I'm waiting there, and this lady says, every time I walk through this hallway, it seems like we must be on the same, you know, hair cutting cycle, which seemed weird. But anyway, I was like, okay, yeah. She's like, I just want to compliment you on your eyes. She's like, every time I see you, you have this sparkle in your eyes. And she's like, I kind of look for it. And she's like, it seems creepy, but every time you're not here when I'm getting my hair cut, I'm kind of sad. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I'm married, just saying. She was like, no. But that is how it started. And we became actually friends just off that passing comment. When I was writing my book the first time, I was sitting in a coffee shop in Round Rock, Texas, writing a book, and this lady happened to notice that I'm there every day when they open at 5 o'clock, and I'm writing when she goes to the office early. So she finally, comes up with the courage to come talk to me one day, and she said, what are you writing? I said, well, I'm trying to write this book. And, we started having this conversation about it. That one real incidental engagement led to, I would be embarrassed to tell you how much I made off Dell, training for Dell. Because one conversation, I'm open to the conversation, I'm open to making myself as interesting as I possibly can be. But more importantly, I didn't really say much about the book. I actually asked, the next 3 interactions with her, I asked more questions about her. Why'd you go to work at Dell? What do you love about Dell? What's the things that are most challenging about your current job? What are the things that you'll be doing in 5 years? Where do you want to go with your career? What can I be doing to help you? And believe it or not, that person just became lockstep with what I was doing and made a huge inroad to help me, get my material into a corporation I never would have known how to get into to begin with.
So all the things that you've been talking about have been things, you're here, you're in the place, and
Yep.
You're talking to people. For any of you in the room, and I'm gonna hit up on extroverts here in a little bit, so introverts get poked at for a moment first, who are sitting here going, sounds great. I kind of like the pandemic. I had to stay inside. I didn't have to talk to anybody. I can sit behind my computer. It's totally normal. There is not an expectation of me having to deal with anyone. So, what advice would you give to people to just help them get out from behind the computer and out of the house and go be amongst the people?
This is a PG-13 response. Get off your ass and do it. Your job right now is to get the job, but your primary function is to get out and talk to as many people as you possibly can. And I'm not saying, it's not like speed dating, and it's not like, I'm going to go do this. If you set a goal and an intention to get out from behind the computer and go at least get a cup of coffee or go spend some time where other humans are, human connection will happen, right? It will, even if you don't necessarily think it will, or you're not super comfortable with it happening. The only way you get comfortable is getting out of your own skin. I have to kick myself in the ass every single day in order to get out and remind myself to connect. You know why? Because being shy and introverted is not an excuse, and it's certainly not going to put food on the table. So at the end of the day, you have to get better and be more conscientious about taking action every single day to do it. And if you can set an intention that, hey, I'm gonna apply for X amount of jobs, and I'm gonna do that whole thing, and we'll probably talk about the network here in just a little bit, but at the end of the day, I'll put my energy and effort towards my previous connections, my previous network, people that I'm affiliated with on LinkedIn or have in my general network. Then I need to go out and I need to get out in the wild and I need to experience other human beings. I need to find opportunities to set myself up for conversations and just challenge yourself to do it once a day. I know so many people right now that are out of work and it becomes soul sucking because all day long they sit behind their laptops and that's all they do. And you're getting worse connected. Believe it or not, getting out and talking to strangers will help you in an interview. It's gonna help you when you get on that new team. It's gonna make you more approachable, whether you're introverted or extroverted. It's going to be a skill that you have to practice. Here's the thing, nobody took any of us by the hand, whether we got that first job or we got out of college and said, kid, come on, let me show you how to get along with the other kids in the sandbox. The vast majority of us view everything, including the world, through one lens, and that's ours, and our perspective is all that matters, and that isn't what matters. You have to figure out how to open that up. You have to figure out how to put the attention and focus on other people. And when you do that, people will pay attention, and people will come back to you because of that. But if it's all what's in it for me as opposed to what's in it for them, you're shortchanging yourself. And the only way you get good at the latter is by doing something every single day to pull you out of that rut to do something. Plus, it's just so good for your mental health. The reality for, I don't have the statistics, but if anybody's interested, I found a study I really like. But do you realize that if you don't have any close personal connections, and I'm talking people that, will return a call, will respond to a text. People will be there for you in the moment of despair because you're just having a really crappy day. Those connections, those people are really critical and important. The vast majority of Americans have less than 3 they can count on that are not family. And the reality is, even if they are, that small segment, you need to expand that bubble as much as possible because number one, in a job search, you want as many people with their antenna tuned for opportunities that might just hop along in their everyday path that would be of interest to you. But if they're not focused on helping you, then they're not focused on helping you. How do you get them focused on helping you is by showing that you're showing up for them first, right? You're contributing and adding value, and your commitment is to grow beyond that connection. You want to turn that connection into a trusted connection, that trusted connection into a relationship. And then you got to go one step further to build that into a trusted relationship. It's a lot of work, but my God, it is so beneficial. It's so powerful. It's part of the reason why I can hear a random comment on a Friday morning and I say, oh, I got something that I know that could benefit Eric. That's how you get the way you are, the way I am with connecting.
So there's a good segue there. We've been talking about meeting new people, but I will actually have clients who will say to me, I'll talk to anybody new anytime, but I'm not comfortable asking my friends and my former coworkers. I'm embarrassed that I'm in this position. And so how can we create ripples from the people who we already have in our sphere?
Yeah, great question. You want to know the percentage or the number of seconds it takes for you to reach out to a former colleague on LinkedIn to tell them you're looking for a job? Less than 30 seconds. That's the last thing anybody wants to hear from you, right? At the end of the day, everybody wants to help if they can, but when you put people on their back heel, they don't know how. So it's easier to ghost you and just to shut that conversation down. So the way that I approach it is that your job, if you need it, the challenge, should you accept it, it's like Mission Impossible here, but at the end of the day, get out, connect with somebody new, and then get back in your network and say, who have I lost contact with? I'm the youngest of 4 children. My next closest sibling, who is the devil, is 10 years older than me. My brother, who's the oldest, never had to look for a job until he did. And he didn't buy into any of the Ripple stuff. I mean, he's just like the little brother. He doesn't believe in any of my crap, right? So, and he finally had hat in hand come to me one day and he's like, hey, look, I'm really struggling. I used to have recruiters calling me and now they're not calling me. I've reached an age. I know that there's ageism happening. And I said, yeah. I said, but you've told me how great a manager you are and all these roles, and he's always been hired up to a better job. I said, how many people in total have you impacted throughout your career? He's like, oh, hundreds, if not thousands. I'm like, okay, start making your list. You make your list and you figure out, where did I contribute and add value to that person? And then ask yourself, when was the last time I talked to them? When was the last time I actually reached out and just said, hey, no agenda, just want to see how you're doing. And here's how you re-engage. We haven't talked in 10 years. That is your fault. So own it. I lost touch with you. I got busy. Things went, a little bit unexpected with my career path, and I just kind of lost touch. I would like to reestablish. Here's why. Not because you're looking for a job, but because you learned something from that person. They brought something to your life. They stood out to you in some way. You take that connection point and you put it back on the table, and it'll be like no time has passed at all. Fast forward to what my brother went through, one of his most junior, sort of indirect reports, but he had a hand in getting her hired, and she did very, very well for herself in, the medical device field. All of a sudden was now in a leadership role with a new company, and she knew immediately by him reaching out what he brought to the table. He's challenging. But she also knew what the challenging aspects were, and he had a job in 2 weeks. So those are things, I know that sounds like pie in the sky, but if you work your current network, that should be as important as meeting new people. You should figure out, who are the people that have the potential to help me? Who are the people that I know hold a special place in my heart and mind? Write that down as to why. That's a connection point. I've had people, and I do this for a living, right? So I still run into people that I have not talked to in a while. And every single time I self-accept the blame for the lack of communication, or should have reached out to you on your birthday, or I said I was going to follow up with you on that coffee and I didn't. I want to get that scheduled right now, and I want to pay for your coffee to apologize. You will build instant rapport back with that person. They'll appreciate it, and it's also one of the best ways to fill your day. And you go in again like a networking event with a game plan, and all of it focuses on them. What's important to them? What challenges are they dealing with? Where can you maybe add value or help them in some capacity? I'll tell job seekers the same thing I'll tell people that are graduating or about to graduate from college. You have the strongest position you could possibly ever be, because it's a role of transition. And that means that there's no rules. You have a lot of flexibility. You have a lot of age and experience in this room that has a lot of talents that are not obvious on a resume. But if I spent 5 minutes with you and had a great conversation, I bet I find them, right? Just like a college, somebody coming out of college, they have youth, inexperience, and they can always say, I'm first, right? I'm new, right? And everybody responds to them. So when you're out looking for what your next role is, not just putting it forward with the people that you re-engage with on your network, but just genuinely reconnect. Try it 2 times, maybe the 3rd time's when you make the ask, and just say, hey, look, I'm not asking you specifically if your company's hiring, or I'm not asking you to, shake any trees. What I would like and appreciate, though, is would you keep your radar tuned for us? And this is what I'm looking for, and this is the role I'm trying to land. After that 3rd interaction, and they know, okay, you've put some work and effort into these initial conversations, then guess what? Something positive will come from that.
You mentioned this idea of thinking about your, I'm going to call it a former network, but your not recently connected network, and thinking about the value that you added to them. And I think that when people are looking for jobs, often you're like, I'm not adding any value right now. I mean, I don't know where that value comes from. And they almost look at it as a tit for tat. If this person is going to help me, what do I have to give back right now? But it's really not about a tit for tat, right? So how does that work?
Let me ask you a question. In this room, how many of you have actually in the last week had anybody say, how's it going? I genuinely care about you and I want to reconnect and re-engage? Maybe a couple, good. You want that from your network. You want to build it. But we don't hear that every day. We don't hear it generally every week. But when you're reaching out to these people and you're doing it, sometimes just actually shining a light and showing them attention is all the payback that you need. How many of us feel lonely and isolated right now just in the worlds that we are in? And the reality is we're just one connection away from making that go away. Just one. By reaching out and putting some attention and focus on somebody else who might be interested in engaging and having a conversation. But here's the reason. For those of you who just raised your hand that you are lonely and isolated, you have got to get off your ass and start building those connections. And here's the reason why. you will have an increased chance of dementia, early onset dementia, when you don't have close personal relationships. Believe it or not, no close relationships is as bad as smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. This is coming from an introverted guy, which people scare me. You people scare the hell out of me right now. Okay? Just telling you.
I got you, Steve.
But yeah, thanks. There's a reason I'm next to the door. Let's just say. But in all honesty, there are health and mental health benefits, physical and mental health benefits by being good at connecting with other people. And it just takes doing something every single day to make sure that you're like, hey, world, I'm here. I want to connect. I want to engage.
So let's make a little shift here to those of you who are extroverts. So I'm assuming that about half of you raised your hand as introverts, the other half are extroverts. And the way
you know how you know an extrovert? Because they're sitting on their hands, they're waiting for you to say, okay, now extroverts show, and then they all look disappointed because they're like, oh crap, I want the attention. No,
hey, I am one of those. Yeah. I get it. The way that I have had someone describe me sometimes is, Courtney, back up. It's like you talk to me and it's like my ears are blowing back. And so because, we extroverts tend to get really excited and we're like kind of in your face and we're not trying to be rude or trying to step on what you're saying. Yeah. We're just excited. So what advice can you give to us from the other side of the street to sit back a little bit, listen, how can we help ourselves not be in your face?
Yeah. This is true for introverts too, though. Find an anchor. So I have a little anchor. My son got this for me because I'm a huge Star Wars fan. That's a connection point, by the way. The greatest teacher of failure is. That's what Yoda says. And it's not so much the saying or the fact that Yoda's head, even though it's pretty damn cool, right? I use this as my centering activity when I'm going into a big event or I'm in a conversation or just to check myself. There's a great question for extroverts to ask themselves mentally, because extroverts have a tendency to be at a higher level. They're constantly thinking of what's going to be said next or where they can add value, or where they can contribute if they let the other person even have a breath, right, to talk. And the reality is, ask yourself, why am I talking? Why am I talking? And if you put it through the filter of why you are talking and what you're contributing, then is what I'm saying helpful or is it self-serving? When you can ask those questions as an extrovert, it will actually keep you in mental check and remind you that your purpose is not just there to talk. Your purpose is to engage. And the way that you engage is having a quid pro quo conversation, having good questions, learning about the other person. And you're not learning if you're thinking ahead of what you want to say next, right? Now, I've been with Courtney, and I know what she's talking about because she wants to grab you by the ears and be like, this is why this is so important. And that's different because she's trying to make a point, but she doesn't do that as an extroverted person. She is one of the best, coolest extroverts you could ever meet because she just eases into conversation, but she's looking at a conversation like she's looking at me now, which is, what are you gonna tell me? Delight me, excite me, motivate me, right? And the best extroverts are really good at turning that optimism and that energy into power that will fuel another extrovert, or it'll actually power up an introvert. And so when you can do that, be cognizant of it. And as an introvert, ask yourself the question, am I being awkward? Am I asking enough questions that will give me information about who this person is? And what else can I learn from this person? If you ask that question alone, you could go down your LinkedIn connections right now and say, what connection point do I have with those people? Do I have one? If I don't have one, that's your first assignment. Go find one, which means you got to engage them and you got to figure out what's going on in their world, what's exciting. Maybe their kid got married, somebody graduated college, they got a new car, they moved across state lines. Those are connection points that give you an opportunity to open up the conversation. But when you look at your network and you say, okay, I know the connection point, what did I learn the last time we engaged? What was the makeup of our last conversation? What were my takeaways from that conversation? And most of the people will be like, yeah, I've never done that, right? Yeah, you need to. Get a journal, get a notebook, get something. Don't stick it in your iPhone or your Google Android notes. You'll never see that crap again, right? But go back to your book, look at those connections, and then that will inspire you as to how to engage next. And it works whether you're introverted or extroverted, but it's all about being that detective, being really curious about what else can I learn from this person. Believe it or not, I'll share this really quick story. The bouncer that tried to kick me out of a bar when I first moved to Texas in Waco ended up...
And what were you doing?
I had broken up with my fiance and I really wanted to kill somebody that night, but not...
Minor detail.
Yeah, minor detail. Not kill somebody. Not really kill somebody. I was a little downtrodden. And I go into this bar and he could basically tell something was up. And he came over and he talked to me. He's like, so what brought you to the bar, on this particular night? And I probably just unloaded on him like, oh my God, I can't believe I moved across the state, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we ended up striking up this friendship. He's been my friend for 40 years. The interesting thing about him, and he knows this, he's got a copy of my book. I don't know if he read it. I think I need to make a picture book for him. But he's a good dude. But he's gone off and done other things with his career, but we've stayed in contact. I still consider him one of my best friends. But about 2 years ago, I was visiting him in Houston, and I asked a question. And he said, dude, every single time we get together, you have a new question. I said, do you realize that you and I could get together for coffee at McDonald's once a week for the rest of our lives, and I still could not learn everything there is to learn about you? You're infinitely interesting. Believe it or not, every single one of you are the same. It comes down to your curiosity and your creativity to figure out how to keep that conversation going and build off the last one to build for the future ones. And part of that is trying to figure out, what can I learn from this person today? So when I go back to my network, what else do I need to learn? Not just about how I can help them and what's like super important, but where can I dig into the depth, right? Where can I figure out how to really make sure I'm not just getting my pinky toe in the door, but I'm actually holding that door wide open with not my foot, my body. And the reality is nobody looks at these things. They don't look at the depth of engagement that they have. Try this on your significant other or your kids. Ask questions that give you a little insight as to how they think and what they do, and when you're not around, what's going on in their world. And you will open up a whole litany of opportunities for you to really enrich that relationship in a big, big way.
Sounds like we're back to the whole idea of intentionality.
Yeah.
And really thinking about, what can I ask? What do I need to ask? What did that last conversation look like? And so how would you suggest, or I'm not even going to ask that because I kind of know the answer, which is, when the last Ripple that I was in with yours, which was over at Baylor, you had us do a Ripple, and you kind of had different levels of questions that you asked to get to those connecting points. Can you share that a little bit for people who may be wondering where those questions come from?
So what's the question everybody asks you at a networking event?
What do you do?
God, I hate that question. I generally tell people I'm a monkey trainer. Really? Yep, there's one right now. And then I get out of that conversation. Incidentally, if you ever do need to get out of a bad conversation, look, there's a monkey. It works every damn time. They will be so confused, and then they'll look around, they won't even remember what you look like, because they'll be like, I was looking for a monkey. Where'd that guy go? Anyway, the questions that I like, I have about, I think we just counted, we're probably pushing like 1,200 what I call Ripple connection questions, but a few of my favorites. Colin, who's filming for me today, thank you so much, Colin. You could ask Colin, what did the 7-year-old version of Colin want to be when he grew up? And people were like, what? Taking it all the way back to 7 years, but every single person has that thing. Like, I just interviewed a principal for a leadership series I'm doing, and I asked her that question. Her entire persona changed. She said, believe it or not, I wanted to be a mortician. I'm like, what the hell? Oh, wow, 7 years old. What were you watching at that time, right? But that led to the most interesting conversation. She said it wasn't so much about, being the mortician. What she really respected is, apparently the church that she went to was tied to the community's, mortuary. And what she really respected and admired was the guy who was the mortician was always front and center of every activity and was always lending a hand to people that really seemed distraught. And she thought at 7 years old, wow, what an important, powerful job. Now, I could have asked, like, hey, so what got you into the whole education game? Why do you like being a principal? And I probably would have led down a different path. But now, do you feel like you know something about this woman? She said, ultimately, her conversation continued. That's what led me into a job of service. That's what I view what I do is a role of service. That one's good. What would you be doing if you're not doing what you're doing right now? You could look at that as a career job conversation, or it could be like you're talking to me. Like, I would be anywhere other than talking to you, Steve. Like, but it's funny the responses I get to that conversation, because you'll hear people, they'll talk about their travel, they'll talk about where they want to go in life, what they want to do, if they are in a career kind of mindset, what job they really would like to have. When you're going in and talking to a recruiter, what is the best part of being a recruiter? Ask that question to the next recruiter you talk to. Nobody ever talks to the recruiters, like ever. These people are your lifeblood to getting your next job. You need to kiss their butt and get to know them, right? At the end of the day, it is a secret power. But I promise you, I just had a conversation with one of our recruiters that's in my community. He says, nobody gives a crap what I do. Nobody cared what my holidays were. They're looking for that, either that placement or they're looking for the job. And I said, that's kind of sad. And he's like, it is sad. I'm on the phone like talking to 60 people a day and not one person's like, dude, how'd your holidays go? So be that exception, stand out, be different, right? The other one that I always like to ask, and it seems like kind of a juvenile question, but has elicited the most interesting responses, what superhero would you be if you could be any superhero? And you can make your own one up, but what superpower would you have? And you hear the most interesting things from people across generations, like what it would be and what it means. The other thing I like is asking what's your, I kind of threw this one on you, like what's your passion, what's your genius? Like what's the skill that you really want to use in your next job that, you maybe haven't had an opportunity to do that or use it up to this point. There's all these different little nuances to where you can take that, and you just want the question to get the conversation ball started, and then you're off to the races. Shannon will probably put us all in touch, right? But we have actually a free website that's got, 25 Ripple connection questions that are fun to ask, fun to answer. The reason I created that, as an introverted, shy person, I hated that question, so what do you do? Like, even when I had something to do and I was out selling for a company or whatever, is the most uncomfortable conversation to answer, or that question to answer, right? So when I asked a different question, I just completely reversed the trend that everybody had experienced up to that point. And that makes you memorable. Memorable has value, right?
So you talk about your website and the pond and how our folks can join.
It's super simple. So ripplecentral.com is my website. Just ripplecentral.com, pretty easy. And then we created, inside that you'll see Connect and Grow. There's a link. You can also go to ripplecentral.com /, that's the little, and then put in Pond. It's a free community that we created, and the goal behind it is actually for people that want to be there, that want to commit to better connecting, right? Building a better network of people that really want to be a contributor to other people's lives in some capacity, right? So we have a couple of unique spaces. We're going to talk about maybe, creating something for, more formally with Launchpad at some point, but we have Career Ripple, which Courtney is one of our moderators. We try to put, ideas and thoughts and do some events that help people that are in career transition, because I recognize 1,000% how sad and isolating that can be. But I promise you just got to find people that are going to support you and help you, and you're going to land that next opportunity. So we're trying to create that as a soft landing spot there. We have a place which we've renamed, called Graduation Ripple, because the guys that are leading it are retired and they don't like the word retirement. So they're creating that. Believe it or not, I get a lot of people that are in retirement that said, hey, my entire network was in my career, and now that I'm not part of the inn, I have no network. So we're actually teaching people that aren't ready to hang it completely up how to get back and engage, and how to build relationships, and how to go out there and create a network of real value now. We've got a WOW, which is our Women Optimizing Women. We're still waiting for that to take off, but essentially, we wanted to create a space for women to support other women, and a positive, uplifting space. Believe it or not, ladies, you guys are not very good at playing with each other. I don't know why. It's real crazy. It could be really good when you're connecting with me, but you're mean to one another. I don't know. We really wanted to create a space actually for people to be like, hey, look, I need kind of that, what is it, the sisterhood of traveling pants, right? That kind of mindset.
Yeah.
That's kind of the goal. And then you just get other regular moosings or whatever from me from time to time. But it's really designed to not be a replacement for Facebook or whatever, but it's really designed to be a private social network that allows you to come connect with other like-minded people who are committed to doing good out there in the world. And part of that good is just by being better at connecting with the world.
So I'm going to do a little bit of a shameless plug here for a moment. Steve's book, which I have, and it is autographed from back when you came years ago. It's a great book. It's a quick read, and at each chapter there's some activities or some exercises for you to do to help you look at your own network or to help you look at some other things. So it's not just a read and try to figure it out. It's got some intentionality behind how do you make this happen. Steve also does these things called Ripple events where you can actually go and he'll walk you through and help you network. And what we move from when you first go, we're not allowed to talk about anything business, right?
Yeah, so they're called 8-minute ripples, right? So what does the guy that doesn't like networking do when he brings out the book, puts on a networking event? And then I put rules on it, and I was like, oh, yeah, well, it's not going to be like every networking event. You can't come in with an elevator pitch, you can't come out with a business card, and you can't talk about anything that denotes status, right? Education, work, whatever. And so I thought, man, this is brilliant. People signed up, it was great. And I'm do my best thinking in the shower naked. That's probably too much of a connection point for you. But I'm like, oh my God, the morning of the event, what are they going to talk about? Like, well, I just took away all the go-to subjects for everybody. So I created these questions that I had always had at the ready, but I didn't call them Ripple Connection questions until that day. And they were questions that I had used that were fun to ask and fun to answer. And we go to the event, and we had some of those power networkers. We've seen those people. They didn't listen or pay attention to the rules, and had to come really respectfully remind them what's going on. And they still ignored me, and then we had to kick them out. Not really. We had some serious conversations. But the neat thing that happened, and I knew we were onto something with these events, was the goal was to find the connection point, right? So you have questions, but what do you learn from these questions from the other person? Because a complete stranger that you're meeting for the first time, you don't generally have this deep a conversation that quick. And believe it or not, that superhero question gets you deep and quick, faster than you could possibly imagine, right? So we had two guys, and I'll just say we put everybody in what we call individual ponds. And we had a guy that looked like a startup entrepreneur, which means that he hadn't slept or bathed probably in 3 days. And then you had a guy that was more of an executive suit, right? Look the part, just very prim and proper. And there were about, I guess at that point, 8 people in a pond. And you could tell these guys intentionally missed each other every time we did a partner switch, right? Finally, they couldn't do it, and they came together, and they got a question out of the pile that's, what is the hobby that most people would be surprised to learn is a passion for you, right? Very mundane, but still I like that question. It's really powerful to get the inside knowledge of somebody in what they love. Turns out these two guys both like scuba diving. And you could see them when they kind of stood up against each other, man, they were like, oh, this is gonna be the most painful interaction I've ever had in my entire life. And in about 30 seconds, that went away. These two guys all of a sudden are gelling in a way that I actually literally, when we were finishing up, I had to go separate them. And I'm like, hey guys, you can come back at the end. We got to wrap up, whatever. And so after the whole event was done, I went and found them. And of course, these two guys are back together talking, right? And I said, I got to ask this question because this is the first time we've done this event. What'd you think? Loved it. I mean, this is really cool. It's the best networking I've ever done. So I kind of noticed you guys kind of avoided one another. And they're like, oh, did we? I'm like, well, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but the executive type said, well, no offense, but that's not somebody I would normally have a conversation with. I had said, hey, if you'd met at a chamber event or Young Men's Business League or whatever it is, would you guys have gone and talked to one another? And the guy says, no, probably not, just by kind of judging the book before I should have, probably not the kind of person I would have normally gone up to engage. And the other guy has the perfect line, He's like, hell no, dude, that guy's a suit. I wouldn't talk to that guy. You forced me to. And
The due to buy.
that's
That's it.
6 months later, these guys left Austin and are working on a startup. Last I heard, still out in California. And that was like 14 years ago, right? So you never know where those interactions might take you, right, in those conversations. So when we do the 8-minute ripples, which we have moved online, quite honestly, I stopped doing them because people would commit to doing, I mean, no offense to Austin, but you people do not generally show up when you're asked to show up, right? Even online. It's like you be in your bunny slippers. All you gotta do is flap up in the laptop. But we stopped doing them in the fourth quarter just to see if people would be like, hey, we're ready for them to come back. So we'll start them again probably in February, but we do them online, and we would welcome all you guys to come join us. They're fun events. They're an opportunity for you to like perfect your chops. We use Zoom in the breakout, so you're actually partnered with somebody for 8 minutes. We put several questions before you, so you've got a variety of questions that you get to ask. And if you can stick to the rules, which is don't talk about anything that denotes status, you find that you walk away being like, oh my God, I know more about this person who's in a 2D world via Zoom than I probably know about my next door neighbor, right? And that's the power of it.
Well, and that's the resources. So you've got the book, you've got Ripples, we kick those off again. You've got Ripple Central, we've got the pond. You know, again, Steve is not just about, talking about doing this. It's very much about facilitating these conversations and helping you to learn how to do it and to become more comfortable with it, and most importantly, to connect with other people. I think we want to give time for some questions.
Yeah.
But before we do that,
Yep.
I want to run down. I was thinking last night, the ripple from when we first met.
Uh-huh.
So y'all, this is what an ongoing ripple looks like. So let me know if I.
She was
forget
about
anything.
7 when she came to the first one.
So y'all know I'm a career coach. I had a client come in and say, "Do you know Steve Harper?" I'm like, "Who? No."
My wife says that same thing.
No, I don't know Steve Harper. Well, he did this thing, this ripple thing, and you might want to go. I'm like, okay. Not 2 days later, another client. Hey, have you heard about this ripple guy? I'm like, no. Well, yeah. So I think I either emailed you and said, okay, all my clients keep talking about this.
Who are you?
Yeah, who are you? And why are my clients talking about you?
I'm like, who are you?
So we went.
I'm Courtney, God.
Yeah, how can you not know who I am? I'm the extrovert. Everybody knows me. So I think we wound up going to lunch or something.
Coffee at Starbucks.
And then we had some other just stuff that happened. At the time I was running a Monday. Well, no, you came to my company.
Came to Ty, yep.
Yeah, we had a company training thing, and Steve came and talked to my group. And then,
Which was super funny because you could tell all these other recruiters were like, yeah, whatever. Like, and then by the end we had them like hooked.
yeah, it was cool. And then the Monday group, and then how did Clayton become all of this?
You and I were talking. You're like, hey, I know this young kid who needs a job.
It was
Internship.
our preacher, my
Internship.
preacher's son, Clayton.
Yeah, so I own a software company as well, and now he runs my customer service. So he was such a pain in the neck, we couldn't get rid of him.
But again,
yeah.
it's just these little things, and so when you think a ripple,
You never know where it'll go.
Exactly,
Right.
a ripple can be a small effect. A ripple can be a big, huge thing that happens, and so I think it's about that intentional ripple. How do you create that and keep those ripples going and bouncing back and forth? So
It's all about the attitude. You got to show up and be willing to do it. I will tell you, the person that actually introduced us, who shall remain nameless because he probably comes to these meetings with regularity, it's a perfect segue to the last point I wanted to make. When you land your next job, dedicate time every week to continuing to build your network, build your relationships. The biggest mistake that I ever see people that when they return to work, because they put all their energy to get the job, and then they throw themselves into a job. The individual that introduced us, every single time landed a job. Dude, you need to make sure you're continuing to build your relationships. He came from a big company, rhymes with hell. We won't say who it is. We'll figure it out. His entire network, when he left that company, was only within that company, right? And so when he landed the next opportunity, thanks to awesome career coaching from Courtney, he threw himself in the job again. I'm like reminding him, look, you got to get out, you got to do something. I'm not saying you have to go to networking events every day. I'm not saying you have to do it every week, but you should at least make a commitment to go to something once a month, right? Yeah, I'm going to do it. But I'm just so busy. And then boom, gets caught up in a layoff, right? And he's back to square one. And, you know, he did this thing 2 or 3 times, and it's part of the reason that he just has never been able to get on and keep any momentum, because he throws himself into work and he doesn't really build any value outside of that work, but he also doesn't spend a lot of time intentionally building relationships within the organization. Best question you can ask day one for whoever's onboarding you: who do I need to know within this organization? Who knows, you know, where all the bodies are buried, right? Who are the people that are the, you know, sort of the information inflow? And go build relationships with those people, because when you do, that will help accelerate your progress and help get you a reputation, a positive reputation within the organization quickly. So,
You want to do questions?
sure, yeah.
Questions?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you find out about the Ripple events?
Go to ripplecentral.com/pond, sign up, and yeah, I exclusively put them out there. Sometimes I tweet them, but most of the time it's through the community. We have a little event section on the side that'll tell you when we host them.
Also, Steve is an amazing content creator. You'll get something almost daily in your inbox. It's awesome.
I won't spam you. That sounded like I'm a spammer. I'm not a spammer.
No.
My VA might be a spammer, but I'm not. Yes, ma'am.
I have one more question.
Sure.
How can we connect with you?
So I left some business cards and some stickers over on that table, so feel free to take those. But yeah, Steve at ripplecentral.com is my email. Feel free to reach out.